Romanticism arrived like a sudden breeze that carried news from a distant dusk. Life could be felt as a pulse, not just observed as a sequence of facts. If the world had become too orderly, too rational, Romanticism asked artists and lovers to lean into the feeling of being alive. To chase the strange spark that happens when the ordinary reveals its hidden poetry. In painting, poetry, music, and literature. This was a shift from rules to revelations. From what could be measured to what could be imagined. And in that shift, art learned to love again. Not as a perfect solution but as a brave, imperfect desire. Think back to the late 18th and early 19th centuries, a moment when Britain, Germany, France, and beyond were catching their breath after revolution and reform. People stood between old hierarchies and new ideas, between certainty and longing. Romanticism didn't erase the past, it rewrote the way we relate to it. It turned color into confession, light into memory, and landscape into a character with a soul. It asked artists not to report the scene as it appeared but to listen to what the scene was telling them about fear, hope, and the hunger to connect. SFX, soft_breeze, foreign painting. Romanticism found its heartbeat in the spectacle of nature as a living force. Caspar David Friedrich wrapped vast skies and solitary figures in silence that hummed with meaning. You could feel a stair-step of emotion in his lonely walkers. Their silhouettes tracing a human date with the immensity of the world. The mountains weren't just scenery, they were moral tests. Thresholds where the heart could expand and question. In the same era, J.M.W. Turner turned rain and fog into storms of color. Where light fractured and danced and suggested that truth was a spectrum you chased rather than a single, fixed shape. The sea raged with memory. The coastline suggested a history of who we are when we face the edge of what we know. SFX, thunder, 2 SFX, crackling_fire, 2 when you hear the thunder in Friedrich's distant shorelines. You're not just hearing a meteorological event. You're hearing a confession about human vulnerability and resilience. Romantic painters invited you to stand close to the storm, not to be overwhelmed but to feel more truly alive. The brushstrokes loosen and the scene breathes an invitation to invest your own emotions in what you see. In sculpture and literature, the same longing found new forms. The body could be a vessel of intense sensation rather than a perfectly proportioned specimen. The Romantic poet speaks in the language of memory and dream, weaving personal experience with universal ache. Wordsworth returns to the felt presence of everyday life, the glow of a daffodil, the sound of a river, the weight of a child's gaze, as if these simple moments hold the key to a larger truth about who we are. Coleridge leans into the mystery, letting imagination co-create meaning where reason alone might recite rules. And in prose, the storyteller becomes a mapmaker of the inner world, guiding readers through landscapes that mirror their own states of heart. SFX, turning_book_pages, 3 The energy of Romanticism wasn't merely about beauty. It was about the dramatic tension between the individual and the vastness around them, the sense that a single heartbeat could change the course of a century. And that tension fuels a particular kind of romance, not a smooth, predictable courtship, but a passionate, sometimes disruptive awakening. Love itself becomes a testing ground for the movements and choices that shape a life. To be in love in this time meant negotiating doubt, confronting fear, and choosing to trust a connection enough to risk losing the safe, known version of yourself. It's no accident that some of the era's most enduring artworks are also love stories, a young couple captured in a moment of revelation. A letter that travels across distance to prove that affection can outlast weather and time. SFX, heartbeat_1, 2 The romance at the core of Romanticism is not sappy nostalgia. It's the audacious belief that feeling has a claim to truth. When an artist paints the sublime, they're saying, even if the world is imperfect, even if sorrow lingers, beauty can illuminate a path forward. When a poet writes about a storm at sea or a ruined cathedral, they're saying that even when the old orders crumble, The human spirit can still be moved to imagine something better. That belief, hope braided with longing, became contagious. It loosened the grip of rigid tradition and opened a door through which later generations could walk toward new forms of love, nature, and expression. Yet Romanticism also fought with its own contradictions. It could overindulge in the drama of emotion and neglect practical realities. It could make nature feel like a mirror for the self, sometimes forgetting that shared life, conversation, consent, collaboration matters as much as solitary feeling. The strength of Romanticism lies in its generosity. It invites us to see a world where awe is okay, where tenderness can be fierce, where truth emerges from the tension between listening to one's own heart and hearing another's need. The art becomes an invitation to persevere through uncertainty, to tend a fragile relationship as carefully as a painting on a canvas. In music, the romantic impulse sounds like a revelation of passion. Beethoven raises the orchestra into a language of revolution and tenderness. He shows us grandeur and vulnerability side by side, like a couple standing on a balcony in a storm, daring to speak the truth of their love even as the thunder rumbles around them. The music becomes a shared experience with the listener, a private heartbeat that expands into a chorus of human feeling. When composers push tempo, exaggerate dynamic shifts, or bend traditional forms, they are tapping into that same longing for a more expressive, more honest communicative space, the space in which love can transform fear into courage and sorrow into meaning. SFX, violin_swell, for SFX, crowd_gentle_ambience, for what did Romanticism change, forever? In the world of art and in the lives of ordinary people who encountered it? It reframed what it means to be an artist. Not as a technician of craft alone, but as a keeper of inner weather. An artist is imagined as someone who can translate the raw texture of life, the ache of a broken world, the sweetness of a shared glance, the stubborn joy that keeps love alive, into forms others can feel and remember. The result is a cultural shift that invites us to trust our senses, to insist on meaning beyond data, and to celebrate imagination as a source of resilience. This is where the romance of Romanticism merges with the romance of everyday life. It isn't about grand, cinematic meets cute moments, though those exist. It's about the quiet, stubborn decision to stay when life gets heavy, to listen when words fail, to create something beautiful even when the world asks you to be practical, to accept that love and art both demand. Romanticism teaches that love isn't a flawless finish line but a living, growing practice. It's the patient process of looking at another person and saying, yes, you matter to me more than fear, more than doubt, more than the urge to retreat behind walls. And the art it inspired gives us a language to keep choosing that stance, day after day. If we look at a painting of a misty dawn, we might see the same decision reflected in the soft glow on the horizon as in the eyes of the figures who stand close, braced against the cold. If we hear a symphony that climbs through a quiet passage into a storm of sound, we feel how love can endure upheaval and still arrive at a moment of shared breath. Romanticism invites us to notice the ordinary light that falls on a familiar street, to notice the way a lover's hand rests on another's back, to notice the way memory can widen into gratitude. It's not escaping from reality. It's a redrawing of reality so that what we experience with others, pleasure, conflict, commitment, becomes part of a larger, meaningful story. SFX, soft_bell_chime, 2 SFX, rustling_silk, 2 inches a sense. Romanticism turned the art world into a diary of human possibility. It asked artists to trust their emotional truth, even when others might call it imprudent or melodramatic. It asked viewers and readers to bring their own stories into contact with what they see and hear, to let art become a partner in the work of healing and growth. And that is where its influence ripples into our lives today. When you walk into a gallery and your eyes rest on a landscape that seems almost to breathe, you're stepping into a conversation that began hundreds of years ago but still invites you to participate. When a film or a novel makes you ache with longing for someone you haven't yet found or has slipped away, you're catching the echo of Romanticism's belief that love is a transformative force, capable of reshaping a life. Let this tell you something simple and powerful: love, in its most enduring form, isn't a flawless moment of arrival. It's a process of choosing to stay curious, to keep listening, to allow art to remind you of what matters most. Romanticism didn't sell a guaranteed happy ending. It offered the promise that even when endings are elusive, the act of seeking together can light a path forward. It showed that beauty, whether on a canvas, in the curve of a melody, or in the quiet forgiveness between two people, can become a shelter and a beacon at once. And that belief is a gift you can carry into your relationships, your dreams, your own creative work. If you've ever stood before a painting and felt your own heartbeat synchronize with a distant shore, you felt Romanticism in action. If you've listened to a piece of music that seemed to answer a question you didn't know you were asking, you've tasted its revolution. And if you've learned to say yes to love again after a season of doubt, you've lived the essence of what Romanticism urged. To trust the unseen thread that binds people and art, to hope, to perseverance, to the possibility of a new, enduring harmony. Romanticism didn't end with a single manifesto or a final flourish of paint. It transformed the attitude we bring to every story, every portrait, every shared moment that makes us feel more alive. It turned love into a creative practice. A practice that invites vulnerability, courage, and tenderness. It reminded us that the most significant revolutions aren't only about politics or science. They can be quiet revolutions of heart and imagination. The ones that redraw our world in colors we never imagined we could bear and still call beautiful. The next time you gaze at a sunset that seems to glow with a rumor of something larger than life, or hear a melody that makes your breath catch, remember this: you're witnessing Romanticism's continuing gift. The art of believing that art and love can forever move us toward a better, brighter, more human ending. SFX, soft_chime, 3. If you're seeking a story to carry you through a tough week, or a reminder that wonder isn't a childish indulgence but a necessary light, you found it here. Romanticism explains not just how art changed forever, but how love, in its imperfect, tenacious bravery, continues to change us every day. And that is a romance worth inviting into your life.